The First Words of the World, a true historical epic of Mesopotamia, Babylon, and the birth of civilization. Prologue, When Time Learned to Speak, Hook. Before there were nations, before there were borders, before there was history itself, there was a land where humans first learned how to remember. Between two rivers, where the earth was soft enough to shape and the sky vast enough to fear, a forgotten world was born. A world where gods were not distant ideas, but rulers, where kings claimed descent from the heavens, where the first cities rose not from stone, but from belief. And most importantly, this was the place where humanity first wrote its thoughts into eternity. Clay tablets, wedge-shaped symbols, words pressed into wet earth. Those marks would outlive empires. They would outlive kings. They would outlive gods. This is not a myth. This is not legend. This is the true story of Mesopotamia and Babylon, the first cities, the first laws, the first kings, and the dangerous knowledge that nearly destroyed them all. And it begins with a boy who was never meant to rule, but would become the first king whose name could never be erased. Chapter 1. The Land Between the Rivers. Mesopotamia, CE 3500 BCE. The rivers did not ask permission. Every year, the Tigris and the Euphrates flooded without warning, swallowing fields, destroying homes, and then retreating just as suddenly, leaving behind soil so rich it seemed touched by the gods themselves. The people who lived there believed this was no accident. They believed the rivers were alive, and if you angered them, they would take everything. The settlement of Uruk clung to the riverbanks like a newborn learning to breathe. Mud brick houses leaned against one another for support. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Children ran barefoot across packed earth streets, still wet from last night's flood. This was not yet a city, but it was becoming one. Among the farmers, potters, and fishermen lived a boy named Enmer, the son of a barley grower. He was thin, quiet, and observant, the kind of child adults forgot was listening. While others feared the rivers, Enmer watched them. He noticed patterns. He noticed that the floods followed the moon, that the stars returned to the same places, that chaos had rules. One evening, as the sun bled red into the horizon, Enmer followed the river farther than he ever had before. There, half buried in mud, he found something strange, a clay token carved with markings. Not pictures, not drawings, symbols. He did not know it then, but he was holding the ancestor of writing itself. The elders of Uruk believed the world was ruled by gods who lived in the sky and beneath the earth. Anu, lord of the heavens, Enlil, master of wind and fate, Inanna, goddess of power and desire. The gods demanded order, and order demanded leadership. Until then, Uruk had been ruled by councils, elders arguing, priests interpreting omens, decisions made slowly, while floods came quickly. It was no longer enough. The people needed someone who could speak for the gods. They needed a king. Enmer did not seek power. Power found him. During the festival of the new flood, when offerings were made to the gods, the high priest collapsed in the temple courtyard. As the crowd panicked, Enmer stepped forward, not to pray, but to speak. "The flood will rise again in 3 days," he said, calmly. "Move the grain, reinforce the eastern bank." The elders laughed. 3 days later, The river rose exactly as he had said. From that moment on, people began to watch the boy, and the gods were watching too. That same night, Enmer dreamed of a ladder stretching from earth to sky. At its top stood beings made of light and shadow. One of them spoke, "Words will bind the world. Write, and you will rule." When Enmer awoke, his hands were covered in dried clay. Pressed into his palms were symbols he had never learned, yet somehow understood. Uruk was about to change forever. Cities would rise, laws would be written, kings would claim divine blood, and Babylon, the greatest city the ancient world would ever know, was still waiting to be born.